It's official. Conor McGregor is off UFC 303 due to injury. His fight with Michael Chandler, I'm assuming, has been rescheduled. We now have a new main event per Dana White, and it is going to be Alex Pereira taking on Jiri Prochazka in a rematch from their fight in November. So that's the headliner. The co-main event is something I discussed earlier in a video, which is now official. It's going to be Brian Ortega taking on Diego Lopez on this card as well, which is a great fight. Talked about that in a different video. We'll talk about that a little bit later. The other fight they added to this card, I actually like this as well. Carlos Ulberg was supposed to fight Jamal Hill. Dana White revealing in this video that Jamal Hill out with a knee injury. Anthony Smith now fighting Carlos Ulberg. I think this is a great fight as well. Again, Smith, a pretty good name. Carlos Ulberg gets a good step up here. I think that's kind of the right fight for Ulberg at this point. But the main event, listen, Alex Pereira saves the day again. He saved UFC 300. Now he's saying UFC 303. Personally, I know people might not like this take. I think this is kind of a mistake doing Jiri and Pereira. I think it should be Magomed and Ankalaev. It's a fresh matchup. We just saw these two fight. I know this is going to be a more entertaining fight. And I know people will be like, James, what are you talking about? The first fight was awesome. What happens if Jiri Prochazka loses this? He's in a really bad spot here. He just lost to Pereira in November. He just fought a couple months ago, as did Alex Pereira. As far as who the fresher fighter is in this fight, it's going to be Alex Pereira. He barely got hit at all in that fight with Jamal Hill. Jiri Prochazka took a bit of damage in that fight with Alexander Rakic. Not a ton, but enough where he's able to fight. I just wonder what they're thinking here with Jiri. I kind of feel like this again, is just the UFC pulling something together at the last minute. Look, like I'm happy to see these two fight, but I also feel a bit for the context of the division where, again, we just saw this fight in November. Why isn't Ankalaev getting the shot? I don't think Ankalaev's that boring. I personally think you could have done Pereira and Ankalaev as a fresh matchup. I think that would have made a little bit more sense. Ankalaev hasn't fought in a while. Like, what do you even do with him now? That's sort of the only thing about this. I do kind of think of, like, from Jiri's perspective, if he loses this again, which I think he can, where does he go from here? Does he go to heavyweight? Because if you lose, twice to the current champ, you're kind of in limbo until the champ loses. I think that's very, very interesting here. I'll be completely honest right now. If I have to make a pick for this fight, I'm going Alex Pereira. I don't think that's enough time for Jiri Prochazka to prepare for the rematch. Again, he took a bit of damage in that Rakic fight. Pereira didn't. Pereira can knock anyone out, as we saw in the last couple fights. The only guy who's knocked out Jiri in the UFC is Pereira. I got to go Pereira in this fight. Again, I like the main event, but I do think that long-term, this is going to hurt a guy like Jiri Prochazka if he loses two fights. That's all I'm kind of looking at here. So that's the first thing. The Ortega and Lopez fight, I already talked about it. I'll briefly mention it here as well. I think it makes a lot of sense. The UFC is very high on Diego Lopez, one of the most improved, hyped up fighters we've seen in a while. Good everywhere. I think this is a fight he can win against Brian Ortega. That is going to be my early pick for this one. Again, I'll be previewing this entire card on the Monday of fight week. I'll kind of get more in depth, but just my initial thoughts are good fight for the division. Again, Ortega would be waiting around anyways, right? Because, most likely you're going to do Max and Ilya or Ilya and Volk. I don't know. Either way, Ortega's not getting a next title shot, right? I think that's pretty much known. So him fighting Diego Lopez, good chance. If Lopez wins, hey, he really is that good. If he doesn't win, no big deal. Ortega gets another big win. He's closer to a title shot. I think that makes sense. And the Smith and Ulberg fight makes sense. And apologies for the voice. I just coached hockey tonight. Came off a good win over Victor Petrino. A lot of people said Smith was going to lose and he was going to be out of the UFC. Smith gets the first round finish there. I think that's good. If Smith is able to get this to the ground, let's see how he does against Ulberg. But again, we saw Khalil Roundtree finish Carlos Ulberg, which is interesting because the guy that he lost to is the guy that Ulberg replaced against Jamal Hill. Kind of funny how that all works out. It'll be tough. Again, Smith's lost, a couple here, right? He beat Spann by split, beat Petrino, lost to Khalil, lost to Johnny Walker. So we see him losing to strikers here. Also got finished by Ankalaev. There's a bit of an injury there, but still too. I think I might go Ulberg here just on this one, just because, again, Ulberg is a little bit younger, does have that deadly knockout power. He's got a bit of a ground game as well. We've seen him obviously submit Dong Jung. Smith can win this. The thing with Smith is he is pretty durable overall at light heavyweight. Right? Like Roundtree finished him. Walker couldn't finish him in their fight. Ankalaev did, like I said, more of an injury, but guys like, Rakic couldn't finish him. Teixeira got a late finish in that one. So it'll be interesting. If Ulberg can't get that first round finish, if the fight goes longer, we've seen Smith be able to persevere and get, wins and come back and get it done. We saw that against Volkan Ozdemir a couple years ago. He's definitely capable of it. So that's a really intriguing fight. But, again, I know people have mixed reviews on Anthony Smith as far as him as an analyst. And even him as a fighter, but I enjoy seeing him fight. So I think this is a very good addition for the card. And this does look more like a pay-per-view now. Adding this title fight, I will say credit to the UFC for putting this together. Again, I think a little bit about the context here as far as Pereira and Prochazka and all that. But Smith and Ulberg's a great fight. What a good replacement. Because they could have just given Ulberg like another ranked opponent here. Sort of like, I don't know, like even like Dominic Reyes, who just won last weekend, they could have even done him as an opponent potentially. But I think the Smith fight makes more sense. Again, if Smith wins here, that'll be back-to-back wins. He's right back in the saddle as far as the division goes. So I think that's very interesting. And then obviously, like I said, Ortega Lopez, a lot of implications for the featherweight division. Yeah, that one's interesting. Like, again, like I'm picking Lopez. I could potentially see him finishing Ortega there. Because again, like, and the fun part about this fight that I haven't even talked about, like, what if this goes to the ground, right? Like, who's got the better jiu-jitsu? I think it's fairly even. And in the stand-up, I think it's fairly even too. Lopez has looked outstanding. I kind of lean a little bit more Lopez just because, again, a little bit more activity there over the last little bit compared to Ortega. One thing I should mention as well, I did speak to Jiri a few weeks ago. He said he'd be ready for 303 in case something happened. I actually brought him up as a, because I mentioned as well, like if they, needed a fight to add to 303. I forget how 303 came up. I can't remember if Jamal Hill was out or something. I forget, but yeah, Jiri stepping up to the plate here. And honestly, I think this is better for Jamal Hill, him being out of this fight, right? It was a little bit of a quick turnaround there. Maybe the injury will be a blessing in disguise. He gets more time off. It's never fun to get an injury, but, kind of looking at the context here, people, if Hill had lost this fight, people would have said it was too quick of a turnaround. Now there's not that excuse. We'll get Jamal with like a really, set full camp with a lot of time off there as well. So again, Pereira and Jiri. Yeah, again, I mean, here's the thing. If Jiri wins this, then that's going to really be awesome. And it's really going to sort of put the division on its head, because right now it looks like no one's going to beat Pereira, right? He's looked outstanding since moving up. But if there is one guy to beat Pereira, it's Jiri. He's got a wild style. Again, Yuri's not coming off that long layoff. He just fought a couple months ago. I think it's certainly interesting here. But right now I'm leaning Pereira just because I've been so impressed with him in his last couple fights. And again, what he did to Jamal, what he did to Jiri. There's reasons to like him here. If I had to guess right now as far as betting odds, I go Pereira's probably going to be about a 2-1 favorite just because he has the win over it already. Ortega Lopez I could see being pretty close. I think Lopez could potentially be a favorite here, although Ortega fought better opposition. Maybe he's the favorite. I could see Lopez being like a -150 favorite. We'll see what the odds come out with. Smith and Ulberg, I think Ulberg will be favored here just because he's younger and again, he's got knockout power. We've seen Smith get knocked out. I'll probably say Ulberg would be about a 2-1 favorite as well as far as guessing on the betting lines for this fight. But let's look at the rest of the card here. Again, this sort of rounds things out a little bit. I don't think Tapology's added. Oh, they have added it. So they're ahead of the draw here. So look at this. You got Pereira. All of a sudden now we got Pereira and Prochazka, Ortega and Lopez, Machado and Page, Pfeiffer and Barrio. I don't mind that being on the main card. Obviously, they're hyping up Pfeiffer a lot. And then you're opening with Carlos Ulberg and Anthony Smith. This does look like a good pay-per-view now. I will admit. I will absolutely admit that. Good on the UFC. They pulled it out. But, again, the reason they're even in this spot is because they do too many events, but they always seem to figure out a way to make it happen. So I'm looking forward to this one. I was at UFC 300. I saw these two fight already, like in separate bouts. So it was cool. Yeah, really looking forward to this card. Definitely added some much needed firepower. I can't wait till the UFC Inc. episodes comes out when they show all this behind the scenes stuff, because it must have just been crazy. I can only imagine what Hunter Campbell and Dana White have been up to. But yeah, just wanted to do a quick video on all the changes for UFC 303. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @LynchOnSports. I'm James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.